Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I've got my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio. And Dad, we're going to start off with our foundational verse. Go for it.
The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord, for he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalms 24, 1 and 2.
Why is that verse important?
Well, because the earth and everything in it belongs to the Lord.
Yeah.
I love what it says in Psalms 147, verse 7. It says, sing to the Lord with thanksgiving, play the lyre to our God, who covers the sky with clouds, prepares rain for the earth, and causes grass to grow on the hills. He provides the animals with their food and the young ravens what they cry for. He is not impressed by the strength of the horse. He does not value the power of a man. The Lord values those who fear him, those who put their hope in his faithful love.
Nice.
There you go.
Yeah, that sums it up. Well, I'm excited about our guests. Let's get on with our show. It's going to be a busy one, but it's going to be a powerful one. We got Mr. Shawn Buckley on the show. Shawn, welcome back.
Oh, thanks. I'm always glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. We're going through a testimony, and this one's going to be a long one. It's going to be a couple days. You guys do not want to miss it. This is one of the most passionate, exciting, common sense, nail it to the tree, everybody drop the mic, go home kind of a testimony. I'm going to go ahead and let you tee him up.
Yeah, so this is Mr. Del Bigtree, and actually his journey is interesting because he was a producer of the show The Doctors, and a CDC whistleblower shows up saying, you know, they're faking the data on vaccine safety, and the network would have nothing to do with it. So he produces this movie Vaxxed, which just gets vilified by the mainstream media, which makes it a sensational hit. And in touring the nation, at every showing, he asks the audience, like, how many people here have a child that's vaccine injured? And it's always 3/4 of the audience basically is there because they have a vaccine injured child. And he realizes this is huge. He's also, he started and runs the show called the HighWire, and he started ICAN, the Informed Consent Action Network, which is the group that's getting all this disclosure from the government. So, you know, the Pfizer dump, you've had guests on that. It was his organization that forced the FDA to disclose the Pfizer documents to support the vaccine. So Mr. Bigtree is being used mightily to bring forth kind of truth about what's going on and focusing much on vaccines.
This testimony was shocking to me because I know Del through his show. I watch his show. I've never seen Del kind of just open to the public like that because I know how television works. You know, I know you've got prompters and all that stuff. He is so knowledgeable. And I feel like this is your most powerful testimony because he's not a doctor. Doctors get lost in the science and all these words and all these molecules and things. He has passion. He's got the stats. He's got the receipts to prove it. As a journalist, I thought it was phenomenal. I'm really excited to get to his testimony. Let's start with part one, then we'll talk about it. Here it is.
First of all, I want to thank the National Citizen Inquiry for having me here. Commissioners, I want to thank you for taking the time on this very important issue. I want to thank Alberta for allowing me to visit. I think there was times when you wanted to have people raise their hand if they thought that the military might come to the door. There was times that I started thinking I wasn't going to be able to travel anywhere else in the world. So we still hold on to some, basic freedoms. I think we have to work very hard that we hold on to them and start pushing back in a major way to make sure we continue having freedom. I sit here and I want to say that I'm a journalist. I am not a medical doctor. I did not go to medical school. My background comes in just being an investigative journalist. I was a producer on the daytime talk show The Doctors, where I learned to read medical journals in order to come up with stories that we turned into television. I won an Emmy Award doing that. But as I sit here, I recognize that we're sitting in a church. I want to thank this church for having stood for freedom. My understanding is they were fined excessively for continuing to stay open.
1.8 million.
That is a testament not only to courage but a belief in God. As I sit here, look at this Bible, It's interesting because at the last minute I thought, I like to make this about science, and it's very important, but I was very early on in my journey discussing the vaccine issue. I kept visiting Mississippi, who had had no ability to exempt out of the vaccine program. And one time I was down there and I was being asked to meet with the health department. And I sit and pray every day to think about what I'm supposed to say. And in that case, I was going to be speaking to the Senate Health Committee. And I recognized that I was in the Bible Belt. And I thought, up until this moment, I've only talked about the science. I've been a medical journalist, but I'm also the son of a minister. And I decided that maybe I should think about bringing a concept of God and my understanding of the Bible a little bit into this conversation, because I do think it's pertinent. So I'll start with my first slide because I think this story goes back this far. This is from our Old Testament, those of us, and by the way, if you're not religious, that's fine. You could just see this as an allegory, I suppose. But as the story goes, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. The story goes on that he creates Adam and Eve and says, you can have all of the greatest beauty in the world. You have dominion over this earth, all these animals. You have a perfect life. There's only one rule. There is a tree called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Do not eat of that tree, lest you shall surely die. As a young child, I would ask my father a lot about this story, and it didn't make sense. I would say, Dad, I don't understand. Doesn't God want us to have knowledge and be knowledgeable and do our studying? He said, well, it's a little bit different than that. It's a little bit more about when you believe you have knowledge, or you begin to believe that you have the knowledge that God has, and you become so arrogant that you lose track of what your limitations are. And I think if you look at the Bible, we think of statements like God knows every hair on your head. I would say that what we're talking about today is perhaps the greatest representation of our, sort of distancing ourselves from Eden. So in this story, if you bring up the next slide, as the story goes, God says to Adam and Eve, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Of course, the serpent, the slyest of creatures, talks Eve into eating from this tree, and God returns to Eden and notices that they're covering themselves, that they're afraid. I think the story could go, he comes back to Eden and notices that they're all wearing masks. And he asks them, what happened? Who told you you were naked? Who told you you weren't perfect? Who told you you couldn't breathe God's air, the air that I've created that was made for you? Who told you you couldn't live on this planet without 72 vaccines injected into your child? Who told you you had an original sin that on the first day you were born, you need to be injected with a sexually transmitted disease called hepatitis B, which is what's happening in America. I believe you can get that on day one here in Canada. If you show the next slide, I think it's interesting that this is the image that brings us all of these great ideas. And I think we have to ask ourselves, have we allowed our knowledge to make us believe that we can mess with a bacteria in your body or a virus in your body, to think that you can start messing with this incredible balance, this dance that's happening on our bodies, in our bodies every single day? There are millions of microbes and bacteria on our hands and skin as we speak. Our stomach is filled with bacteria and viruses, and we have allowed simple thinking human beings to decide that they're going to kill one of those viruses or kill several bacteria or inject us with mRNA technologies that we just heard could be reverse transcriptase delivering into our own DNA. Folks, I would say that we have strayed very, very far away from our understanding of our limitations. We have lost our humility, which was so brilliantly stated by Marty Macri, who is now being in confirmation hearings for the FDA. And that lack of humility is what we were warned about. Should you lose your humility, should you become so arrogant that you believe you can play like God, you shall surely die. And I do think those are the consequences we are beginning to face as we rush headlong into our arrogance. as I stated, I was a producer on the daytime talk show The Doctors at CBS. I won an Emmy Award, which is the highest award you can receive in television, working on this show where we celebrated the best that science and medicine has to offer. What I'm going to share with you is my journey. It's a fairly long one. That started in about 2014 when I stumbled upon a story of a whistleblower inside the CDC named Dr. William Thompson, who came forward and said that they were committing scientific fraud on the vaccine safety studies. I was tipped off to this story. I pitched it to my executive producers, and they said, we're not going to go anywhere near that story. We're a medical talk show. We are not going to say that the CDC is committing scientific fraud. They allow us behind the scenes every time we have a flu outbreak. We don't want to hurt that relationship. Also, most of our funding comes from the pharmaceutical industry. The MMR vaccine, which was at the heart of this study and this fraud, is made by Merck. Merck was an advertiser with our show, and so I was asked to step away from it. I didn't. I went on to make a documentary called Vaxxed, From Cover Up to Catastrophe, which you have mentioned. And that, as you pointed out, came into serious controversy, which I'm going to show you today is a lot of how media is used as propaganda now, not just in America, but I also believe in Canada and around the world. This was the response when we were accepted into the Tribeca Film Festival by the media.
Now to a firestorm over the film festival and a Hollywood star. The decision to run a controversial documentary about vaccines has Robert De Niro at the center of a big screen backlash. But late tonight, a new twist. ABC's Eva Pilgrim has more.
Tonight, the film festival Robert De Niro started under fire. The Hollywood heavyweight initially defending the screening of a controversial new film that many are characterizing as anti-vaccine.
Grievous harm to innocent children.
De Niro writing in a statement why this is important to the actor and his wife. Grace and I have a child with autism. This is very personal to me and my family, and I want there to be a discussion, though he isn't anti-vaccine. That statement generating backlash on Twitter, comments like disappointing and really irresponsible. The film is directed by Andrew Wakefield, who authored the faulty study that linked vaccines and autism. That report now retracted and Wakefield stripped of his medical license.
This film is just the truth as we have found it.
But the message from the medical community is clear.
This is one of those scientific questions where science has provided an answer. Study after study have been done and have shown vaccines do not cause autism.
And late tonight, a reversal from the star. De Niro telling ABC News that after conferring with scientific experts, he's decided Vaxxed will be taken out of the Tribeca Film Festival, saying he does not believe it contributes to the discussion I had hoped for. Eva Pilgrim, ABC News, New York.
That ended up being the biggest media news story in the United States of America. We ended up outbranding Vaxxed. Everyone wanted to know why this film had been kicked out of the festival. And we began a tour across the country that sold out in every theater we went to every single day for a year. I did Q&As after every one of the screenings, 5 screenings a day. In the second screening in New York City that we had, there was a line down the block, and I was curious about who the audience was that was lining up to see our film. And so at the beginning of the screening, I said, would everyone with a vaccine-injured child please stand up? It was a theater that held about 120 people. It was a small art house theater, and more than 3/4 of the room stood to their feet. And I remember feeling like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room, or that I'd been punched in the chest. I had done a dozen or so interviews in making this documentary with a great team of filmmakers, including Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who's always been at the center of this conversation. But looking at that room, I had a different realization. I thought this was a small problem, and it looked like it was a very big problem. And as I toured the country 5 shows a day, I asked that question every day, every show, and every time 3/4 of the room would stand up for an entire year. This was not a small issue. This was a tidal wave. And I found it shocking that no one in media was covering it at all. What ended up happening, what was also amazing, as these parents of autistic children, when they would stand up, they would turn to each other and realize for the first time in their lives that they were not alone. They had been being gaslit by their own pediatricians and doctors that told them it was their imagination when they first thought it was the vaccinations. Usually they were talked into getting more vaccinations and watched their child regress even further into autism until finally they came to the conclusion that they would stop vaccinating. But still they were at home. They couldn't go out in public because their autistic child might not be appropriate, might go up and run up to a police officer, or, you know, all sorts of different issues. And suddenly in this theater, the one night they decided to go out, they recognized that all of these people had children with the same issue. They would come up to me and say, I can't believe it. This person lives 5 doors down from me, and I did not know that they had a child suffering from autism also. Those parents began asking if they could record their stories, and we recorded thousands of stories of vaccine injury across the country. We began traveling the nation in a bus that said Vaxxed on the side of it, and everyone started signing their names of their injured child or their dead child, and that bus is now a memorial covered in names all the way around it. You can barely see the black paint any longer. Near the end of the year traveling with that, there was a question that kept coming to us after the screening, which was, okay, the MMR vaccine, which was at the heart of this study, very quickly, what the whistleblower said was that they were doing a study. They had a study plan. You set a study plan in science before you begin that study so that you set the parameters by which you're going to adhere to. They had a group of children from Atlanta. They were going to study whether or not the autism was more likely the earlier you received an MMR vaccine. What they saw was that was exactly the case. If you received the MMR vaccine before 12 months of age, you were 4 times more likely to develop autism than if you waited till after 3 years old. The study appeared to be so damning that they broke their study protocol. They kicked half the kids off the study in order to manipulate and lower the number to make it look better. That is scientific fraud. And unfortunately, that is the last. This study was done in 2000. It was the last study ever funded by the United States of America looking at the MMR vaccine and its connection to autism. So when you hear that we're extensively looking at vaccines have been looked at, you know, we have a mountain of evidence. We haven't funded 1 red cent since this fraudulent study was done in 2000 to 2004. But as we were traveling, people kept asking me, well, that's the MMR vaccine. What about the other 16 vaccines we give our children in 72 doses in the United States of America? I think your program is close, maybe not quite as aggressive as ours. And I didn't have an answer, except that I would say, I have interviewed parents across this country, and what I can tell you is there's not a single vaccine that is being left off the table. Every one of them has people telling me my child died from a flu shot. My star athlete teenager has been paralyzed ever since they received the Gardasil HPV vaccine. Or the one that I heard the most was, our child never got to the MMR vaccine. We lost our child regressing into autism after the DTaP vaccine, the diphtheria, tetanus, and acellular pertussis. I heard that story so many times that from that anecdotal evidence, I would say that I believe that the DTaP is more likely aggressively causing autism than even the MMR vaccine, which was the center of my film. I started the Informed Consent Action Network, a nonprofit designed so that I could investigate every single vaccine on our childhood schedule. I brought in a team of scientists, and I also brought in a legal team. We started reading every trial that existed on every single vaccine ever done, specifically on the childhood vaccine. And I want to be clear, we hear 2 words, that vaccines are safe and effective. I was only concerned about 1 word. How did they determine that this product was safe? Why am I seeing 3/4 of an audience stand up with vaccine injury everywhere I go? How did they say that it was perfectly safe? So we just looked at safety in every single trial. In 1986, we passed the Vaccine Injury Compensation Act, which protected all manufacturers from liability. that liability protection was demanded by the pharmaceutical industry because, in their own words, they said, we are losing so much money from death and injury from lawsuits, we cannot make a profit off of vaccinations. So they essentially blackmailed Ronald Reagan and our Congress, the United States of America, and said, we're going to stop making all vaccines unless you protect us from liability. And so we passed the 1986 Vaccine Injury Compensation Act. That's important because, unlike every other pharmaceutical product you read about that you can sue, ultimately we get to the bottom of the issue. We are able to get into a trial. We can have discovery in the United States of America where we get to see your emails. We get to see all of the background trials that you hid from the public, and we can see whether you knew this product had issues or not. That's why we see products like Vioxx pulled from the market when we find out that they knew that the product always caused heart attacks prior to it ever being released to the public. We just saw Johnson & Johnson's baby powder a few years ago pay a multi-billion-dollar fine because they recognized their talcum powder had carcinogenic materials in it and that it caused cervical cancer, and they allowed us to powder our babies and our children, and women were using it, getting it out of the shower. For decades they lied, and finally we had a trial and were able to see they always knew that their product caused cancer. But you can't do that with vaccines because we can never get into a courtroom. I brought in a constitutional attorney named Aaron Siri, we came up with a different plan. If we cannot sue the manufacturer, then let's start suing the government of the United States that's protecting them from liability. And if you bring up the slide, we have won lawsuits against the NIH, the CDC, FDA, Health and Human Services. As I pointed out, we won against FDA and got the Pfizer documents, the Moderna documents, the V-Safe documents. We are the most successful nonprofit at bringing lawsuits against the government in terms of health, I think that's ever been. And full disclosure, we spend somewhere between $5 to $7 million every year of the funds that we raise suing to get the transparency and truth from our government that should be handing it over for free. And I want to thank everyone that supports our work for making that possible.
Anyone that sues the government, Shawn, I'm a fan of. I don't know. I just am. Because it's like, wow, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. It was so good. Fascinating testimony. Fascinating that how God works, even when he has his movie Vaxxed out with Robert De Niro. And because, Robert backtracked and backpedaled on it, that even propelled the movie exposure further, more than you could ever imagine. and all the theaters are packed. Fascinating stuff. What do you guys think, Shawn?
Well, I think his journey is really illustrative, and clearly in my mind, God is using him. So here he's involved in this show, The Doctors, and we've got Dr. William Thompson, a CDC whistleblower, coming to them saying, look at, they're basically fudging the safety data. So the CDC, there's this trial, does the MMR vaccine cause autism? And is there a difference if you give it later than, first day of birth or first month or whatever? And the data is showing, oh yeah, if you wait, there's less autism. So they basically dump half of the study participants so that the data doesn't look so bad. You think that any news network, any show like The Doctors would be all over this. This should be front page news. They should be blowing the whistle themselves. But instead they say, no, we won't cover this. And one of the reasons is because the pharmaceutical companies help finance the show. So, if we're talking about how God involves people, those people lost an opportunity to be of service to all of us. And yet Mr. Bigtree, he decides, no, I can't let this go. So he's now off the show. He produces Vaxxed. The mainstream media does him a favor in vilifying him and vilifying the show. So it's sold out for a year in every place that it goes. And he's having 5 shows a day. Isn't it funny how God turns whatever happens for good?
He does. Dad, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing. And of course, he was one of the guys, along with many others as well, that were willing to put everything on the line and expose the truth. And, it's amazing that God picks all of us, whether we're from the United States or Canada or whatever, to do this, because it's the only way that people are going to know is through these kind of venues.
It's funny, when I was preparing to call him as a witness, I do background on witnesses, and I think his Wikipedia page, basically calls him one of the, biggest misinformation spreaders out there. Like, so there's this whole machine that has smeared him. Like Mr. Bigtree has really been subject to, a information campaign to vilify him. And yet he's just been consistent in standing out there. And I think he sets an example for all of us. And again, it's like, isn't it interesting how the people on that show reacted differently? Everyone but him caved in. And I think all of us have to understand, when we face, when God reveals to us something that's wrong, that we need to stand up for, like, please make the right decision.
Yeah. I think this also proves that, you can't suppress the truth. It doesn't matter if you want to take the movie out of the film festival and because you don't want to have anybody to see it. You can't suppress the truth. If you're a willing servant of the Lord to be able to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and speak out, God finds a way for the truth to get out better than you and I could find a way for the truth to get out. He had whistleblowers come when he was an executive producer or a producer of doctors. He had that situation with his film explode. He literally asked a question to everyone in the movie theater every time it aired, and people were proving his own point. Vaccines damage children. What are you guys going to do about it? I love what he's doing, and I'm excited for the rest of his testimony. He's coming up again tomorrow for part 2. You guys definitely got to watch. Shawn, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always appreciate being on your show. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. The title of your show is so appropriate because you're telling the truth.
I'm just so excited. I'm excited. Finally, we're in a place. I mean, Del Bigtree, I'm going to talk to Shawn about how this even happened on tomorrow's show, came to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada on his own expense to tell his testimony and to share his testimony. Is that not amazing?
It tells a lot about the man, doesn't it?
Oh my goodness, it's just exciting. We're giving away a free booklet called The Living Stone, A Journey of Transformation by Alan Huntsberger. It's yours absolutely free. This is going to help build your strength, your life stronger in Christ. You can get it for free by calling our toll-free number, 1-800-915-0056 in Canada, 1-800-445-3450 in the U.S. If you want to help support our mission, we need your help. We are viewer supported in order to keep this truth on the air. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on the donate button. You could also do it by mail. You can make a check payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association. That's our nonprofit charity. And send it to 246 Stewart Green, Southwest Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H3C8. And you can always call our 800 line for prayer or to donate that way, 1-800-915-0056. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.